Folks, gather round for a moment. Down there at the bottom of your wood stove sits a fine gray dust. To most of the modern world, it's nothing more than a nuisance, something to be shoveled out, bagged up, and tossed away, without a second thought. A chore, a mess, an afterthought. But if you've lived long enough to see a few hard winters through, you know, better, that ash is not dead. It is a biological archive. It is the memory of a tree's entire life, compressed, concentrated, and waiting. Every year that tree stood in the forest, it pulled minerals from deep underground, calcium from fractured stone, potassium from ancient soils, trace elements carried upward by rain and root pressure, season after season, sunlight fixed into wood, water woven into fiber, decades of quiet work, all reduced by fire into a fine, pale powder that now sits beneath your stove. Fire doesn't destroy minerals, it reveals them. Our Yankee ancestors understood this instinctively. In early New England, nothing that passed through fire was considered waste. Wood ash was called garden gold. It was used to make soap, to scour pots, to clean silver, and most importantly, to feed the soil that fed the family. Those first farms didn't run on bags of fertilizer. They ran on cycles. Trees fed the fire fed the ash fed the soil fed the crops, and the crops fed the people who planted the next generation of trees. That loop wasn't philosophy, it was survival. Somewhere along the way, we were taught to break that circle, to see ash as dangerous, dirty, inconvenient, something best handled by a trash service or buried under plastic liners at the landfill. And to be fair, there is a reason for that fear. Raw wood ash is not gentle. Handled incorrectly, it can do real harm. Fresh ash mixed with water can reach a pH of 11, sometimes even higher. That's more alkaline than household bleach. Spread carelessly, it doesn't feed soil, it shocks it. It overwhelms the delicate chemistry that allows roots, microbes, and minerals to cooperate. Many gardeners learn this the hard way. One enthusiastic afternoon. One bucket dumped where it doesn't belong. A few weeks later, leaves yellow, growth stalls, roots blacken and scar. The soil looks rich, but plants behave like they're starving. That contradiction is the heart of the problem. Ash holds abundance, but it's locked behind fire. And like fire itself, it must be tamed before it can be useful. Our ancestors didn't just know that ash worked, they learned how to make it safe. Not by neutralizing it with chemicals, not by diluting it into uselessness, but by letting life do the work. They discovered long before microscopes or pH meters that when ash was allowed to sit, to breathe, to mingle with sugars and time, something changed. The sharpness softened. The minerals became gentle. The soil responded differently. What they stumbled onto wasn't superstition, it was fermentation. And once you understand that ash stops being a risk and starts becoming one of the fastest, most powerful soil amendments you'll ever touch. In the next part, we'll step into the danger zone, why raw ash behaves like a chemical weapon in soil, and why modern advice often stops halfway to the truth. For now, remember this. Ash is not waste. It is unfinished material. Fire only opens the door. Life finishes the work. Before we talk about turning ash into medicine, we need to be honest about what it is in its raw state. Wood ash is not mild. It is not natural in the gentle sense people like to imagine. Fresh ash is aggressive chemistry. When wood burns, everything organic, cellulose, linen, sugars goes up in smoke. What remains is the skeleton of the tree's mineral life: potassium, carbonate, calcium, oxide, magnesium, salts, and a scatter of trace elements. These compounds are powerful bases. When they meet water, they don't dissolve politely. They react. That reaction is why a slurry of fresh ash and water can spike to a pH of 11, sometimes even 13. At that level, you're no longer dealing with soil food. You're dealing with something closer to lye. In soil, that kind of alkalinity behaves like a blunt instrument. Root tips are not armored. They are thin-walled, semi-permeable membranes designed for exchange. When raw ash hits them, it strips moisture from cells, denatures proteins, and leaves behind chemical burns. Gardeners often describe this as root scorch, but that phrase softens what's really happening. It's cellular damage. Above ground, the symptoms can be confusing. Leaves may yellow even though the soil tests rich. Growth may stall in beds that were thriving weeks earlier. Flowers drop. Fruit sets poorly. The plant looks hungry while sitting in a mineral buffet. This is where ash earns its bad reputation. At high pH, nutrients don't disappear, but they do become unavailable. Iron, manganese, and phosphorus get locked into forms roots can't access. The soil is full, but the plant is starving behind a locked door. And then there's the microbial cost. Soil life runs on balance. Beneficial bacteria, fungi, and protozoa operate within fairly narrow pH ranges. A sudden alkaline shock wipes out sensitive populations and favors only a few survivors. That collapse echoes upward through the system. Nutrient cycling slows. Organic matter stalls. Soil structure tightens. What started as an attempt to feed the garden ends up silencing it. This is why modern advice often swings too far in the other direction. Many extension services now warn gardeners away from ash entirely. Too risky, they say. Too unpredictable. But that conclusion mistakes misuse for impossibility. Raw ash is dangerous for the same reason fire is dangerous. Not because it has no value, but because it has too much all at once. The missing step is transformation. Left alone, ash doesn't mellow quickly. Rain leaches it slowly. Carbon dioxide from the air reacts over months or years. In a forest, this happens gradually, diluted by leaf litter, buffered by humus, moderated by time. In a garden bed dumped from a bucket, it happens violently. Our ancestors learned to accelerate what nature would have done anyway. They found a way to take that sharp mineral edge and round it off before it ever touched the soil. They didn't neutralize ash, they domesticated it. And the key wasn't water alone. Water just activates the chemistry. The key was life. When microbes enter the picture, everything changes. Living organisms don't fight alkalinity with force. They dissolve it with patience, excreting acids, binding minerals, and converting raw compounds into forms that cooperate with roots instead of attacking them. This is the line modern gardening advice rarely crosses. It treats chemistry as static. Our ancestors treated it as negotiable. In the next part, we'll step into that negotiation, how fermentation turns fire's leftovers into something soil can accept, and why tiny bubbles in a jar are a sign that the danger is passing. For now, hold this boundary clearly. Raw ash is not evil, but it is unfinished. Handled with respect, it feeds life. Handled carelessly, it burns it. Imagine a clear jar on a porch rail. Inside it, cloudy water, a scoop of gray ash settling toward the bottom, and a spoonful of dark molasses dissolving into slow amber threads. It doesn't look like much. No drama, no sparks, nothing that suggests power. But within hours, something begins to stir. Tiny bubbles cling to the glass. A faint movement rises from the bottom. Carbon dioxide, breath. The unmistakable sign that life has arrived and found something worth eating. This is where the transformation begins. Fermentation is not rot, it is controlled digestion. When sugars enter a moist environment, they invite microbes, yeasts, lactic acid, bacteria, and wild organisms drifting invisibly through the air. These microbes don't care about gardening trends or fertilizer labels. They respond to opportunity. They eat the sugars, and in doing so they excrete acids, lactic acid, acetic acid, citric acid, mild organic compounds that on their own seem insignificant, but chemically they are precise tools. These acids don't attack minerals, they wrap them. This wrapping process called chelation is the heart of the fermented ash secret. Potassium, calcium, and magnesium ions in raw ash are reactive and aggressive. Left alone, they spike pH and burn roots, but once chelated, they are buffered, stabilized, held in suspension by organic molecules that prevent sudden chemical shocks. As fermentation progresses, two critical things happen at the same time. First, the pH drops. What began at a dangerous 11 or higher gradually settles into the high 7s or low 8s. Still alkaline but no longer caustic, a range that soil organisms can tolerate and plants can negotiate with. Second, the minerals become biologically legible. Roots don't eat raw rock. They absorb ions carried in water, often mediated by microbes. Fermentation pre-digests the ash, converting fire-released minerals into soft, mobile forms that move with moisture instead of resisting it. This is why fermented ash works faster than most bagged fertilizers. Synthetic products rely on solubility alone. They dissolve, spike, and flush. Fermented ash relies on cooperation. Minerals move only when roots or microbes pull them. Nothing floods, nothing overwhelms, and the microbes themselves matter. As they multiply, they create a living buffer around the minerals. When the solution is applied to soil, those organisms continue working, competing with pathogens, stimulating root exudation and accelerating nutrient exchange. Gardeners often describe this moment in simple terms. The plants respond immediately. Leaves deepen in color. Growth evens out. Stressed seedlings stand back up. But the real work is happening underground. Roots sense consistency. When nutrients arrive in stable, gentle forms, roots branch instead of burning. Fine white root hairs multiply. The plant shifts from survival mode into expansion. This is why fermented ash doesn't just push top growth, it builds structure. It also explains why you'll never see this product on a store shelf. Living solutions don't like confinement. Sealed, tight fermentation builds pressure. Gases expand, containers fail. Life refuses to be packaged safely for long, which is why this knowledge survived in backyards and barns, not factories. In the next part, we'll walk through the exact method how to brew this tonic safely at home, what signs to watch for, and where people most often go wrong. For now, remember this: fire releases minerals. Fermentation teaches them how to behave. When you let life finish the work, ash stops being a threat and starts becoming food. Say tip part 4 when you're ready to brew living gold. You won't find this recipe printed on a bag or stamped with approval from any garden authority. Not because it doesn't work, but because it refuses to sit still. This is a living brew. It changes by the hour. And like anything alive, it demands a little attention and respect. But the process itself is simple, deliberately so. Our ancestors didn't need precision instruments or lab coats. They needed something that could be done on a porch, in a shed, or beside a woodpile. Here's how the transformation happens. First, start with the right ash. Not all ash is equal. Hardwood ash, oak, maple, beech contains significantly more potassium and calcium than softwoods like pine or spruce. Softwood ash still has value, but it's weaker and more resin-contaminated. If you're going to do this, start strong. Sift your ash. Remove charcoal chunks, nails, and unburned debris. What you want is fine, pale powder, the mineral residue, not the leftovers of combustion. 1 cup is enough. More is not better. Next comes the water. Use 1 gallon of non-chlorinated water. Chlorine doesn't just kill pathogens, it kills the very microbes you're trying to invite. If you only have tap water, let it sit open for 24 hours. Time and air will take care of the rest. Pour the water over the ash, slowly stirring as you go. The liquid will turn cloudy, almost milky. That's normal. That's chemistry waking up. Now comes the catalyst. Add 1 teaspoon of unsulfured molasses or a few spoonfuls of mashed ripe fruit. This isn't plant food. Plants don't drink sugar. This is microbial fuel-fast energy to jumpstart fermentation before undesirable organisms take over. Stir it in thoroughly. At this point, cover the container loosely, never airtight. A cloth, a lid resting on top, anything that keeps insects out while allowing gases to escape. Fermentation produces pressure. Trapping it is asking for trouble. Set the jar in a warm, shaded place, not in direct sun, not in the cold. Think porch corner shed shelf or under a tree. Now you wait. 5 to 7 days is typical depending on temperature. Once a day, give it a gentle stir. You're not mixing ingredients, you're redistributing life and oxygen. Watch for signs. Within a day or two, you should see bubbles rising when stirred. The smell will shift. At first sharp and chemical, then slowly earthier. When the bite fades and a mellow, almost compost-like aroma takes its place, the danger has passed. The liquid will darken to a rich brown. That's your signal. What you've created is not fertilizer in the conventional sense. It's a mineral tonic wrapped in biology, unstable, alive, temporary. Use it soon. Before application, dilute it. Always 1 part fermented ash tea to 20 parts water. This isn't optional. Concentration is how people get hurt and how gardens get burned. Apply it only to moist soil, never dry. Roots under stress are more vulnerable to chemistry, even buffered chemistry. And respect the red lines. Never mix this with synthetic nitrogen fertilizers like urea or ammonium nitrate. The chemistry releases ammonia gas, harmful to lungs, lethal to roots. Keep them separate always. Avoid acid-loving plants. Blueberries, azaleas, potatoes, this is not their medicine. Used correctly, this brew doesn't shock soil, it integrates. In the final part, we'll talk about what happens next, why plants respond so fast, how roots change, and how this old technique quietly prepares gardens for drought and instability. For now, remember, this isn't magic, it's patience made practical. When people first use fermented ash, they often focus on what they can see. Seedlings break the surface sooner. Leaves darken to a deep, steady green. Stems thicken. Growth evens out in beds that used to feel unpredictable. Some gardeners measure it and swear plants grow 30% taller than their untreated neighbors. But the real story isn't above ground. It's in the roots. When minerals arrive already buffered, already softened by biology roots, don't retreat, they explore. Fine white root hairs multiply, forming dense fibrous networks that move water and nutrients with quiet efficiency. Instead of chasing shallow moisture roots, push downward, anchoring the plant and widening its reach. Potassium acts like a traffic controller, directing sugars where they're needed most toward flowers, fruit, and storage tissues. Calcium reinforces cell walls, giving plants structural strength and reducing problems like blossom end rot and disease susceptibility. Magnesium supports chlorophyll production, stabilizing energy flow instead of spiking it. And because fermentation brings microbes along for the ride, the soil itself changes character. Pathogens face competition. Organic matter cycles faster. The system becomes less reactive and more resilient. This is why ash-amended soils show something else that matters more every year: drought tolerance. Plants grown in mineral-balanced soil manage water differently. Their stomata, the microscopic pores that regulate breathing, open and close with more control. Even under heat stress, they lose less moisture and recover faster. While neighboring gardens wilt and stall, these plants hold on. Modern science is only beginning to confirm what older gardeners learned through observation. Minerals don't just feed plants. They teach them how to cope. And this is where the circle closes. The tree that stood for 50 years gathered minerals from deep earth, Fire released them. Fermentation softened them. Soil accepted them. Roots learned from them. And the next generation grew stronger because of it. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. In a world that tells us to wait for permission, to rely on supply chains, labels, and distant factories, this practice quietly pushes back. It says resilience starts at home. It says the hearth and the garden are not separate systems. It says knowledge survives when we use it. By fermenting your wood ash, you're not just feeding plants. You're restoring a cycle that modern life tried to break. So the next time you shovel that gray dust from your stove, pause. See it for what it is: not waste, but potential. Not danger, but unfinished work. The deeper the roots, the stronger the garden. The stronger the garden, the steadier the hands that tend it. If this way of thinking speaks to you, if you believe soil should be alive and knowledge should be shared, leave a comment below. Let us know how you use wood ash or what you've learned from the old ways. Give this video a like if it helped you see your garden differently, and subscribe to Wild Root for more practical, grounded wisdom that stands the test of time. Keep the fire burning, keep your soil alive.